Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we have a very, very special pre-trade deadline episode of the Let's Go Warriors vidcast. I am your host, Daniel Hardy, along with my good friend and co-host, Dubs. You can find him at Punk Basketball. Mr. Dubs, how you doing, bro?
Strong, very strong. It's a good day today, guys.
Yeah. Good day today. It's always going to be a great day when you add on one of our old school homies, one of the GOATs in the Warriors analyst game. You know him from Forbes Sports. His name is Patrick Murray, all the way from the UK. Mr. Murray, how you doing, man?
I'm good. It's good to be back.
Glad to have you, man. You actually messaged us that you wanted to come back on the show because you had some burning topics on your mind. And I'm wondering, are any of those topics related to the Warriors have a 19-19 record at the time of this recording, with a lot of the fan base confused, worried, and pessimistic?
So, yeah, I mean, it's about, this season's a really strange season. It's obviously the moment Klay Thompson went down with an injury, it kind of changed the trajectory of the Warriors, really expecting to contend. Now it's kind of pushed to next season. So it's difficult to go through this. But the next 6 months are really going to determine quite a lot about whether the Warriors get back to contention or not next season, because you've got the trade deadline coming up. And then after that, obviously, you've got a really important offseason, and you might get that Minnesota draft pick, which at the moment, they got a 60% chance of it being 4 or 5 in the 2021 draft, in a draft with 5 really top flight prospects. So, interesting times. But yeah, the season's, it's been interesting, but fundamentally, they've dropped games they should have won against the elite teams. They've generally got blown out. So yeah, a lot of angst at the moment. What can they do about it?
That's fair. Do you guys feel 19-19 with the makeup of the team going into the season without Klay? Do you think that's about right, or do you feel like they've underperformed?
Well, I think that it's a little bit lower than I had wanted, but I was thinking 6 to 8 seed coming into the season, and I feel like the sort of error band associated with projections this season are a little bit wider than normal. So I'm not as upset as some people are that the Warriors are where they are right now. I watched a lot of really bad Warriors basketball growing up. So I understand fundamentally what a 500 team looks like. The Warriors on paper look like a 500 team. And unfortunately, 500 teams, they lose a lot.
No, I mean, I'd agree with a lot of that. I think I had them, thinking, again, it's kind of 6 to 8, but if they were going to take a bit of time to gel, 9, 10, I mean, they're, where they are now is in this new play-in tournament. So they still should get a playoff berth, really. The thing I think that's probably been a little more disappointing is that the rest of it's been such a weird season. It's so bunched up down the bottom that, just a few games one way or the other, and they could be much higher up the standings. So there's about half a dozen games they've dropped, which if they won half of them, they'd be, in that, perhaps in that 5-6 range. Having said that, obviously their draft pick this year is they traded away in the Oubre trade, and it's top 20 protected. So if they end up in that 4-5 range, they lose the pick anyway. And, so it's kind of swings and roundabouts here. I think that perhaps the bit that's given me kind of a bit of pause for, a bit of worry really is it feels like some of the habits they had like last season, where they were, being close in games and then losing because they, just didn't have the talent. They've kind of forgotten how to win a lot of close games. And then they're just so far off those big teams. And it's like seeing Steph Curry basically play his unanimous MVP season and be, 9th, 10th. I can understand why people are upset. But again, Klay Thompson goes down, it's that unique combination that that's been so important. And ultimately, what really matters in this season is that Steph Curry looks like he can play at that level, that MVP level, for several seasons more. And that's what matters for the Warriors windows, I think.
Well, I think that's the part that gives me pause before my emotional trigger snap, and I'm just like, why are we losing to the Hornets? I think that the injury issue, not only Klay Thompson, which was massive. I mean, talking about an all NBA player going down, right on the day of the draft. You know what I mean? And then you have Marquise Chris, who last year was the starting center, his role with this team was supposed to really be, in tandem with Looney and Wiseman in that rotation there. So you take him out there, he was going to get some pretty solid minutes, especially having a year in the system. So now that's gone. So now you lose your prize reserve big, and you lose your prize, all NBA future Hall of Famer shooting guard. And then it's like, okay, the expectations for this team, where do you start putting them at? And I guess my frustration is not with the team so much itself. It's just that in a COVID season, there was no training camp. There was no preseason. Repetition is what makes you great. You know what I mean? Saying the same thing and learning it, and you can do it in your sleep, is what makes you great. Well, that practice time has been taken away. Okay. So now you have a situation where going to the season, a team that needs the most repetition and practice time and camaraderie building, that's gone. So now you're thrown out there in the COVID year with a bunch of teams who want to stomp the Warriors out for years and years of demolishing them. It's like a recipe for disaster. So I'm pretty grateful for the way that the Warriors manager has still managed to put out a competitive team, despite the fact that, most teams, I mean, look at LeBron. Like, LeBron's a perfect example. He lost Kyrie Irving. He lost Kevin Love. Was like, I don't know what you want me to do, guys. Like, I'm doing the best I can. Like, come on. Like, Steph Curry hasn't even done that. I mean, the closest we've ever seen him come into blowing his top was him being like, come on, guys. People were like, oh my gosh, what is Steph doing? He's losing it. You know what I mean? Like, that's how good we've had it, and that's why this the season's so tough to watch in a lot of ways. Now, I think identifying the problems there, or is like maybe the hardest part as us being analysts, armchair. Oh, actually, Forbes money over there. You know what I mean? You might be off the armchair a little bit, but for me personally, I'm definitely sitting back deep in the couch giving my opinions. And I'm asking you guys, problem-wise, what do you look at this team and say, okay, with the COVID season in mind, blah, 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 what are problems that right now you look at it and go, that has to be fixed ASAP?
Well, I'll go first, Patrick, and then you can kind of build off or go tell me I'm wrong. I see a couple of problems. We talk about how they got into the same habits that they had last year where they couldn't close, and they might just not be good. Pascal is probably the best player that came out of our lost season last year. And he's super inefficient. He's 19th percentile in points scored per 100 attempts, which means he's not efficiently getting buckets. And he's also not a great defender. So you combine those two things, and it's just a problem. And then structurally, we have Stephen Curry, who does a lot of things. But we also have Draymond Green, who does a lot of things. And he also doesn't do some very important things. Like, he's not a scorer, just like Kayvon Looney, and that's fine because he does so much other stuff. But the problem is that presence of a non-scorer puts inherent pressure on the rest of the lineup to cover a lot of gaps. And we just have not been able to. Wanamaker couldn't shoot. Oubre and Wiggins are both doing okay, even pretty well, depending on where your expectations are. But again, they're not really playmakers. They don't really have a drive and kick game as much. They don't really generate a lot of assists. We have just some structural issues where they've been forced to rely on a bunch of not limited players, but incomplete players. And I think that when we lose guys like Livingston and Iguodala and Durant in a single year, plus Klay Thompson, it's just a lot of gaps to fill, and you talk about LeBron, what he would do. LeBron would leave this team and, stuck with these, Wiggins contracts to be like the new age Cavs now. And he would go to some other team and team up with a superstar. We're hoping to not have that happen, but the Warriors do have some sort of historical inertia, roster construction problems that they're going to need to get around. And they just frankly don't have a lot of tools.
So I'd agree with a lot of that. I think the number one thing I would say, and I mean, this is stating the obvious, but just look at the Warriors offense. There's one player who can shoot. Two players who can shoot when you've got Klay Thompson out there, it is going to look a lot better. Now, whether that's enough and how Klay Thompson's going to look coming off 2 serious injuries, 2.5 years out of the game, there are questions around that, especially defensively, potentially. But so I think that's the number one problem. That I think the point about that Mr. Dubs makes about backup playmaking, I think that is huge. So I think part of the reason that Draymond Green is averaging so many assists is there's no one else to handle the ball. So, Oubre is
and he's an amazing passer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But like when there was Iguodala, when there was Livingston, when there was Durant, the ball was shared around. The assist totals were down.
Totally.
But he has been great on playmaking this season.
Oh yeah.
Like, assist to turnover ratio for Oubre, he's always had throughout his career. I think he's had more turnovers than assists. And actually, to be fair to him, he's got better. And so I've gone on a bit of a journey with him, I think, this season. And I think the piece you wrote today, Dubby, is like, I thought that was really good. And we'll definitely get into some of the numbers and cap stuff in a minute. I think then, for me, so the other like really big picture thing is they're stuck between these timelines. So you've got Wiseman, potentially the Minnesota pick, coming in over this season and next season. And at the same time, Steph Curry's turning 33, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson 31. Like, how long can they go on at elite level? How quickly can the young guys get good? So I actually think the next few months are really, really important for James Wiseman because, to me, he looks like exactly what you would look like if you'd never played any or hardly played any kind of high level competitive basketball and spent an entire year in a gym playing on your own. So his skill level is way ahead of where I thought it would be. And I'll put my hands up to that. He pulls out moves and it's like, you just think, oh my God, this guy is really going to be something. But then he can't, I think a lot of the stuff around catching lobs and stuff like that is just the mind working at game speed, and that will get better. So the more time he gets on the floor, similarly defensively, the more time he gets on the floor is, the better he's going to be next season. So in a way, this season does buy a bit of time to try and narrow the gap between how quickly he improves and how quickly, and like you're seeing, as I was saying with Steph Curry, with the playing so well, like he does not look like he's slowing down at all. So, that elongates the window a little bit more, which maybe gives you a little bit more flex than you might otherwise have had. And just one thing, just on Draymond Green scoring, because I everyone's talking about that. I think it is an issue. But the interesting thing for me is that if you look, what you really want out of him is the playoff scoring, right? So if you look at his playoff total, playoff numbers, he's always down. I think it's 12.5 or something points a game, and always in double figures except for his rookie year. And like last time they were in the playoffs, 2019, when they went all the way to the finals, obviously, he was like a shade under 50% from the field. And you know what he shot from three? He shot 22.5%. So like he was so effective, in transition, near the rim, all of that stuff, that it didn't really matter that he wasn't hitting the three in the same same way for much of the playoffs. So like obviously you want him shooting a better 3-point percentage than he is now, but like he shot worse than that, and the Warriors were really good in the playoffs. It's, can he get, has he got the athleticism still to get out in transition, get to the rim? What does that look like? And if it's only for bursts, has he got those bursts in the playoffs?
There are issues that we can easily point out to, but the fix for them, when you're saying, we need better shooting, like we have Klay Thompson on the roster, just a little hurt right now. Okay, well, does that mean we mortgage some of our defense, like trading Wiggins or Oubre, who've been outstanding defensively? Do we trade them and get some more shooting? Give them some shooting on the shelf? Okay, that's a problem. Oh, also, we have Wiseman. Okay, this guy is actually kind of a shooter. So if this guy gets time to develop and gets his reps in, does that add the shooting you need? Pieces like Pascal, Poole, is it a reps thing or not? So that's where it's weird, because on one hand, if you believe it's the reps thing, there's no way you want to trade, because you're like, let's give these guys time to grow, as NBA players would. But if you're in the camp of, hey, Steph Curry only has so many years to be great, and as Patrick said, thank goodness it's not going to be the end of it this year, because a bigger window there. But okay, how do we maximize what he has now? Now, an interesting parallel for me when I think about this is LeBron with LA. When he first came to LA, and it was like all these young assets. Oh, man, you get Lonzo Ball, you get Brandon Ingram. Who's the third guy? Josh Hart. It was like, if LeBron can raise these young guys up under him and get a squad going, Kyle Kuzma, you know what I mean? What's going to happen? And so on Christmas Day, 2019, when they laid the smackdown on us, and it was like, wait a second, like, even when LeBron hurt his groin, they still kicked our butt with Zubac at center. It was like, this team is good. And what happened? They got all shipped out for a superstar who came in and made the Lakers unstoppable, right? So I think we're looking at that parallel and being like, okay, if we can take these young guys who may or may not pan out and turn them, with the draft picks we have into that dream player, that dream scenario, why don't we do that to, basically make sure that we are not wasting Steph Curry? Now, this is where you guys' insight is going to come in handy, because if you're in that camp, you have to bring up a plausible scenario where you bring in, and you can't just say somebody, it has to be a specific name. Who do you bring in while mortgaging all those assets that the Warriors are clearly investing in? And that's what I'm going to ask you guys. What do you guys see in that regard happening?
Realistically, yeah, dude, totally trade for a superstar with your spare parts. But for me, Bradley Beal is not a superstar in that tier. And the problem with the supercharged things is like, how are we going to get Giannis? I don't know, so those solutions are a little less intriguing for me. Whereas I think that a team like OKC is really high up for some draft picks, and maybe some cheap young rotation players that can fill a role for a little while. I know he's doing great there, but I would look at a more middle ground solution, because I don't know that trading for a superstar is something you can plan for.
What are you giving up for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
I would think it would be a whole bunch of picks, and then some sort of combination of maybe like a Kelly Oubre sort of player. You get somebody who's, again, though, this is the problem that I have with these trades. It's like, I just, other than like imagining some big like trade override NBA 2K move, I don't know what we're gonna do here. If you're not gonna include people like James Wiseman or Stephen Curry, or maybe you are gonna include James Wiseman, I don't know. But the point is that teams will take everything that we have to bring us a superstar, and sure, that's the way to get back into contention for real. But otherwise, if we're talking about little moves the Warriors can make around the edges and like, you got to bring somebody in, I think it almost certainly costs somebody like Oubre. So I would want someone like Shai, who can ball handle and create a little bit, and might be available for our offer price of a nice draft pick or 3.
So as long as it's not the Minnesota draft pick, I think that's interesting. So for me, like I'm not my kind of starting position, I'm not trading James Wiseman or that Minnesota pick for anything less than, and Bradley Beal is an interesting one because he's like right on the cusp for me. Is he good enough to put you over the top? I mean, and we can get into some of that. But like this draft, you'll get a 60% chance instead of 4th or 5th pick. There's 5 top guys. You're looking at getting a Jalen Green or a Jalen Suggs, probably, maybe a Jonathan Kuminga, one of those guys. And like 5 years down the line, a team with one of the Jalens, James Wiseman, and Steph Curry still running around off screens at 38 or whatever, that is the makings of the next really great team for the Warriors, I think. So there is like a real temptation to say, you know what, let's grow our own superstar, because we've got these incredible tools. Actually really rare for a team with the kind of core that the Warriors have had, of Curry, Klay and Draymond Green, to be in that position where you can elongate this run. And then you're looking at, can you build back into a contender next season and the season after? And then maybe there's kind of, as those younger players come up and take over some of the burden, you might get that kind of, you might get one, or you could get a ring in the next couple of years, basically led by Steph, Klay and Dre. And then like that right end of career ring that Tim Duncan got, where Kawhi Leonard was, had kind of developed onto the scene. But there's no guarantees of that, right? And I mean, there's no guarantees of anything. So I think, Bradley Beal is interesting, but it's a question of what you give up and what you do around the finances. Look at the price of superstars nowadays. You're not getting them for less than, the Minnesota pick, Wiseman, and probably a bunch of other picks as well. So that is, that's the reality of that. I mean, look, in terms of financially where they are, because this I think is when I was gone through these kind of various different scenarios, and it has kind of helps me think through like realistically what they can and can't do. So, just for this trade deadline, right? You've made a really good point, W, about Kelly Oubre. He's an expiring contract. If you want to, if you're going to let him walk, maybe you probably want to trade him now to get something back. I mean, you could do a sign and trade, sending out and bring back a draft pick or something in the summer if you really end up down that. But I think that's a decision to be made. The other one they've got is the disabled player exception that they got for Klay Thompson. So that means you can bring in a player for 1 year. Basically, either they're on the expiring contract that expires this summer, or you can sign a 1 year free agent, basically, or one season free agent, I should say. So it would expire in the summer as well. Anywhere up to the full mid-level exception is about 9.5 million. But let me just paint this picture for you of what that looks like in terms of the finances. So if you keep everyone on the roster and use the disabled player exception somewhere near the max level. So, people have talked about Nemanja Bjelica as a stretch five, who might be quite easily gettable. You wouldn't have to give up very much, but that'll take you up to 360 million this season of salary and tax. So, good luck with that. And then really, what's the point of using that disabled player exception and keeping Kelly Oubre around unless you're going to re-sign them next season? Because you're not winning this season realistically. You're building for next year. So this is insane, because next season they hit the repeater tax, right, for the first time. So this is what the kind of dreaded repeater tax. The tax multiples go up. The total salary is about 194 and a half, 195 million. The luxury tax payment alone, that if you keep all those, and we're talking about Kelly Oubre at kind of existing money, if he plays really well, he could get more than what he's getting now. But just at kind of the level he's at, it's 309 million in luxury tax alone.
Wait, the tax is 309 million?
Yeah, exactly. So your total is over $500 million for a team that, you've got Wiggins, you've got Oubre, you've got maybe someone you've brought in on the disabled player exception, and you've got the pick that's conveyed from Minnesota, because that has a cost if it's 4 or 5, that's $6 million. You've got Wiseman as well. So now let me just say one thing the Warriors sneakily did last season, that, they beat the Lakers out in the Forbes annual rankings of, Lakers took an L despite winning the championship, and the Warriors going 15-50 for the first time in 20 years.
Let's go.
Other than the Lakers and Knicks broke into the top two. So the Warriors are now the second most valuable franchise in our rankings. And people, reasonably say, well, they're going to sell. So, what does the ranking mean? Well, actually, it's made up of lots of different things. For example, operating income. And basically what's happened is Chase Center has exploded the income. And that's in a season where they were losing a lot, had no playoff revenue, and and there wasn't a full complement of games or indeed concerts over the summer. So the Warriors are going to have a lot of money, but 500 million for a team that, it's probably like maybe, it might be there, but, it might be like 50 wins. I can't see Laker doing that. I just, however much, he has tended to spend, but so then you've got to start making some choices. And I think that basically counts out the disabled player exception. And then it's like, do you re-sign Oubre or not? So if you've got Oubre or someone in Oubre's salary slot, but not someone in the disabled player exception slot, or indeed the taxpayer mid-level, that's 450 million. So even that is, and you let Oubre walk, you're down to 341 million. So what's happening here is the repeater tax they're so far over the luxury tax limit, up to, so in the scenario where they keep Kelly Oubre at like $15 million,
right,
they're $50 million over the luxury tax threshold. So that's where you're getting this 450 million from. And why, if you subtract that? So what that tells you, they can't really afford to keep everyone on the roster and add the pick in that they might
keep going, guys.
Be looking at getting from Minnesota. So that leads you down some different paths, I think, of what you might do. And there's a couple, we can talk through.
Pat, actually, I did want to ask you about this, right? Because in that article that I wrote today about Oubre, I actually quoted one of your articles because, the idea is that they're paying Oubre 14 million or so in salary, and the bottom line cost is about 82 million, just to give a sense of scale of like how much this really costs. And you're talking about a franchise valuation that is really based on a San Francisco property. It's not just the games and the concerts, which are zero now. It's all of that retail space that they have, all of that office space that they have, and this project, when they develop it, remember, it's primarily an office space project. That's by square footage, that it's much more significantly made up of office space and lab space that they can rent out. And right now, I don't know the real estate market in San Francisco, but I assume it's not good because there's nobody down there. At some point, the Warriors are going to have to figure out what to do about this. And this is one of the reasons why I was really sad, angry about the Wiggins trade, because it's not that Wiggins is not going to help at all. It's that for a team that's already carrying Steph on a supermax, Klay Thompson on a max, Draymond Green is not a maximum contract, but he's close enough to be functionally equivalent. And then you've got Wiggins now on his like rookie scale max. So that's a really heavy burden to carry. And I feel like maybe the fans are a little too eager to pick around the edges, which is what I was doing in the proposed trade, which I suck at, because it doesn't really make sense to do that, right? That's an answer, but the bigger question that needs to be addressed is, if you're carrying 4 maximum contracts, that's about 70 or 80% of your overall salary cap. And that leaves a lot of room. So in my opinion, if you're going to really bring in another superstar, you're really going to be talking about moving either Wiggins or Draymond Green.
So I'm going to ignore that moving Draymond Green bit.
Insane. Crazy person.
This is what I want to talk to Patrick about, though. Is like, what? There's no other. I mean, those are the moving pieces.
So you're right. Well, there's a couple of different ways you can do you can do this superstar deal. So one, if you were to find one who was available at the trade deadline, and this is something I floated about 6 months ago, was you can do effectively whoever you get through the traded player exception. So that would be Kelly Oubre, James Wiseman, who's on about 9 million now, and then Kevin Looney's contract gets you to about the level of Bradley Beal's contract, right, for example. So you can do that trade now. But that leaves you, where that leaves you, is it leaves you with not 4 max contracts, but 5 max contracts. And so next season, just to kind of set this out, Bradley Beal's got the extension that kicks in, $34.5 million. You are then
no sector to speak of anymore.
Yeah, and you are then at similarly, you're at $450 million for that roster. So for me, I mean, I think what you're driving, TW, is absolutely right, because ultimately Wiggins was brought in to be the ballast for a superstar trade. That was the point of that salary slot. Now it was why they did the D'Angelo Russell trade in the beginning. And yes, Wiggins is, in terms of the fit, and he has been fine. Defensively, he's been a lot better than a lot more consistent as well than he had been in Minnesota. But ultimately, you're paying him 31 million next year, 33 million the year after. You can't, and you're in the repeater tax. You've got to use that salary slot on a superstar or get rid of it. So for me, the more interesting, the question around Bradley Beal, the big question about Bradley Beal is, we should point out the Washington Wizards do not want to trade him. Like Ted Leonsis is the owner of the Wizards, is, he would rather get into that 9th or 10th play-in tournament and make the playoffs and just generate a bit of winning culture than he would trade Bradley Beal. And Bradley Beal is a very good player. I think I'm probably slightly higher on him than perhaps W is. But, let's, for argument's sake, say that Beal says, I can't play with Russell Westbrook anymore. Let me go and play with Steph Curry, because, who wouldn't want to play with Steph Curry rather than Russell Westbrook? That's happened before, where someone's left Westbrook and come to Curry, of course. But, maybe I shouldn't reference that. But so, let's pretend that for a second that Beal, for this thought experiment, that Beal decides, okay, I'm up for a trade. If Wiggins is the ballast, you've also got Wiseman's salary in there. So the one that I think is quite interesting as a kind of hypothetical at the trade deadline is you need to make up more salary coming back from that because it's higher than Beal's salary. It's over the limit you can do. But what about you send out Wiggins, you send out Wiseman, you send out the Minnesota pick and whatever other kind of draft picks that the Wizards managed to extract from us in their negotiating tactics. What you get back is Bradley Beal, and you get back Robin Lopez. And the reason I think this is a little bit more interesting is because if you think about how the Warriors are structured at the moment, like really you're getting Bradley Beal for next season for 21-22, and you can play Curry, Beal, Klay, Draymond Green, a center rotation. The advantage of this deal is you can re-sign Kelly Oubre. So you've got Kelly Oubre coming off the bench and also to be that fifth guy in the death lineup. But I'm not. This is my thing. I'm not 100% kind of sure that if everything broke right, a team of Curry, Beal, Oubre, Green, and a center rotation of Lopez, Looney, and a returning Chris, which is a classic Warriors, beefy veteran, switchy center, bouncier, younger athletic center. I'm not so sure that couldn't make some noise in the playoffs. Like the thing about this season is everyone's kind of a bit mediocre. There's no like overarching favorite. The Lakers are kind of wobbly. The Jazz, they're playing great. By the time this goes out, I might look stupid if I, because they'll have,
we'll be down by 500 points or something.
Yeah, exactly. But over in the East, Brooklyn, you've got no deep, obviously offensively amazing, but no defense. Philadelphia, you're always hinging on Embiid's health. I'm not sure that team couldn't at least give a bit of a run this season, and then next season, you can bring those pieces back. And just financially, because you've swapped out Wiggins' contract instead of Oubre, you're then at next season you're at 388 million, which is a lot of money. But it's a lot of money for a contender with a cash cow arena. So you're under that 400 million mark. And, is that worth giving up the Minnesota pick and Wiseman for? I don't know. Personally, I don't think I'd make, and I've written about this, I don't think I'd make a move until I know what that Minnesota pick is. And I've seen the next few months of Wiseman. But it's a deal you can revisit in the summer using Wiggins as the ballast. You wouldn't get Lopez in that because he's a free agent. But, basically Wiggins as the ballast is the way that this happens. I think if otherwise it's just too expensive for the Warriors.
So when you break this down,
one thing real quick, I would almost argue the opposite about the Minnesota pick. Right now, there's a 40% chance that pick doesn't turn into anything next year, right? It may not convey.
So if it doesn't convey, it's an unprotected first next year, and I'm going to bet against the Timberwolves every draft. Like whenever the Warriors and the Timberwolves are linked in the draft, it never turns out that well. So I think they would be better because if you're top three, you're getting like a Cade Cunningham or potentially or Evan Mobley or something like that, and those are kind of the rare kind of impact rookies, and maybe. If Edwards takes a leap, if Towns is back, if Russell's back, they can be a bit better. But I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. I think it's still a lottery pick next year.
How concerned are you that if we say, okay, we're just going to run it back with Klay Thompson next year, hoping he's healthy and providing that extra offense we need, considering the fact that even as is in complete shambles, they're still 500 fighting for a 6-8 playoff seed as predicted with a top 10 defense. And how much of that is simply a matter of, hey, give these guys time in jail and bring in Klay Thompson back?
So I think for me, the key argument here is I don't think they can afford to bring everyone back.
Okay. Next
season. So that is going to be like 450 million if you bring back Oubre as well. So Oubre's been a big part of that defense. I mean, I think, ultimately I'm in the camp of let's keep these young guys and hope that Minnesota pick comes across and let's see how they grow. And there's an opportunity there, I think, to do that. But I think fundamentally you're going to have to choose between Wiggins and Oubre, which one you keep. And I'm in keep Oubre camp because bluntly, it gives you much more flexibility going forwards. Now, can you dump Wiggins' contract? Like, if you're not going to use him in a superstar trade, and the reason we're talking about Bradley Beal, by the way, is there's no Anthony Davis, there's no Giannis, there's no Joel Embiid. None of these guys are on there. You hear these other names getting tossed out there of kind of some young up-and-coming kind of second-tier guys that might make that leap. I'd rather bet on James Wiseman and whoever we can get with that pick, if it conveys, than put the lot into someone who's already proven they're not quite there yet,
Right.
So but to give you an example of that, what that would mean if you traded if you moved off Wiggins' contract somehow and kept Oubre, you're looking at, remember the figures I was talking about, you're at 500 450 million, you're doing pretty well to get under 400 million.
Right.
Dump Wiggins' contract, total is 226 million, 227 million. So
is that non-replaced though, correct?
Sorry, that's not replaced. So you have to dump the contract completely. So that's going to be hard to do. I've got a theoretical idea of how you could do it. Whether or not it is doable is another question. But if you can do it, you're only 20 million over the luxury tax, and that's with keeping Oubre. And then you can start doing stuff like using the taxpayer mid-level exception. You can kind of you've got your draft, the Minnesota draft pick, and you've got James Wiseman on the roster as well, and you still got your starting lineup next year is then Steph, Klay, Oubre, Draymond Green, James Wiseman, and one of the rookies off the bench. Now, if the pick doesn't convey, then I think you have to make a move in the summer because you can't wait another year of Steph Curry's prime. So it does. There's a real decision point around whether that pick conveys. I think that will force things. But yeah, if you can get off Wiggins' contract, and I'll give you one thought. One of his former coaches, this is what he had to say about him. Huge difference. He's grown. I think this environment is perfect for him. I think the job that Steve Kerr and his staff have done, they've challenged him to grow. His defense is vastly improved. His all-around play too, and it will get better and better. Blah, blah, blah. Basically, you get the picture. This guy's much better than when I coached him.
You're trying to send him to the Knicks.
Yeah, exactly. So who's got the cap space and not gonna, and you're gonna have to give up like some pick, right? You're gonna have to you got to sweeten the pot. But I've seen the Knicks make so many bad trades, man. You've got a pick on a team that it's got, and Wiggins, if you can rehabilitate a bit of his value this year, it's only 2 years left on the contract. I think realistically, you're looking at you probably wait until after the draft and you use your own pick, and then whoever you've got with your own pick, and then the 2022 pick, because you can't trade them in consecutive years when they're just picks, but once one's picked, you can.
Right.
So you can throw you throw a couple of picks in. Maybe you can con them into taking Eric Pascal. I mean, although his defense is probably so bad, Tibbs would go nowhere near it. But they've got a lot of power forwards. They love collecting power forwards. It's my guy Obi Toppin hasn't got on the floor because Taj Gibson is playing. That's how loyal Tibbs is to his former players, right? So I mean that is. I don't know how realistic that is, but that's to me, if you're not using Wiggins in a superstar trade, you've got to get off that money because it just hamstrings you for the next few years, and you can't get any better. And you lose Oubre, who, he's got flaws. He's not the best player. And if you can swap him out for someone better, I mean, I've at times thought, well, the salary slot matches Andre Iguodala. Could you just bring him back through an Oubre trade? But and not just for the Forbes interviews, obviously, which but yeah, I mean, so I think that you need that salary. You need the ability to have some smaller contracts to get better, because it's really hard to trade a $30 million contract. Yeah, a $15 million contract, you can get a decent player out of that. And we've seen that. That's how we use the traded player exception, And similarly, you use taxpayer mid-level, it's like 5-6 million. You can get something, you can get a starting center for that. You can go out and get Robin Lopez or whoever for that, So that for me is the kind of the final thing. I'm in the camp of sticking it out until the summer. If the pick conveys, get off Wiggins' contract. If the pick doesn't convey, well, then let's have a conversation about whatever superstars are out there. Bradley Beal, 1 year left on his contract at that point. that might be the moment where he says, all right, enough, Russ. I've had enough. Let me go and play with a real point guard. Stephen
I
Curry.
mean, you're already dead set on somebody getting moved, regardless. You're sure of this in your heart.
So I mean, maybe not. We'll see. Maybe at the trade deadline, but certainly by the summer, I just can't see how they keep it all together. It's just so expensive because they hit the repeater tax, and that contract is 31 million. I mean, look, so if you keep all of them, it's 450 million. You move Wiggins' contract, it's 227 million. You're like, it's too much just from that. Like, how can you justify that? However, marginal improvements he's made in his game, I don't know. Maybe Joe Lacob was so dead set on Wiggins being this great player that he swallows that. Or maybe they do say, actually, Oubre expiring contract, you did your job nicely filling in Klay Thompson. Thanks very much. We'll do your sign a trade on the way out so we get a draft pick or something. That's absolutely possible. But I just can't see how they bring anyone back. And I think that means it does kind of force some thinking, at least at the trade deadline. For me, I still think you do want to wait, and it's the summer that's probably going to be the real action.